Welcome to this course where I'm going to teach you how you can convert a design and layout that you create in Photoshop into an HTML document. Now, this may be somewhat confusing to you if you have a little bit of Photoshop experience and you know that Photoshop can export HTML. It can. The problem is Photoshop will export HTML, but it'll create a table-based layout. And that's really an older way of creating HTML documents. You really want to be positioning your content with CSS, and Photoshop doesn't have that ability. You have to write it by hand. In order for you to get the most out of this class, you should have some working experience with HTML and CSS. If you don't, I would recommend taking our HTML5 Fundamentals course and our CSS3 Fundamentals course. After that, you should have some experience with Photoshop. Now, you don't need a great deal of experience with Photoshop. In fact, our introduction course would probably be overkill in order for you to get the most out of this class. But you do need working experience with Photoshop, and if you don't have any, then the intro course is a good place to start. Once you have those requirements under your belt, you're going to need some software. You're going to need an HTML editor, and it doesn't really matter what you use for an HTML editor. You could use something as basic as Notepad++ for Windows or TextMate for Mac OS. You could use something a little bit more robust like Aptana Studio or Dreamweaver. You also need a copy of Photoshop. In this class, I'm going to be using Photoshop CS6, but that's not to say you need the latest version to be able to follow along. If you have Photoshop CS3, CS4, or CS5, you should be just fine. I would also suggest installing all major web browsers on your system. And if you don't, you should have access to a service like Adobe Browser Lab. Now, if you're a Mac developer, you're going to need access to a service like Adobe Browser Lab because there's no other way to test your design in Internet Explorer unless, of course, you have access to a Windows system. So those are the requirements to get the most out of this class. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a finished design inside of Photoshop. And I'm going to show you how you should approach that design when considering how to convert it to an HTML CSS based layout.